And we are go live.
Good evening. I see some attendees rolling in. Let's give it a minute. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for this community meeting on the Douglas MacArthur New Build Project. Before we get started, just a housekeeping item. We do have Spanish simultaneous translation available, interpretation available. If you go to the bottom of your screen and click on the globe.
Buenas noches, gracias por reunirse con nosotros en este nuevo proyecto de Douglas MacArthur. Y si alguien necesita escuchar esta reunión en español, tenemos una intérprete en español que lo va a estar haciendo simultáneamente. Por favor, presione el globo en donde menciona el lenguaje español si quiere escucharlo en español. Gracias por estar aquí.
Thank you. And I'll now turn it over to Dr. Hutchings for a couple of introductory remarks.
So thank you, Ms. Gulick. First, I just want to thank our administrative team at Douglas MacArthur. I know who are on here. I know you all are working tirelessly to make all this happen, and you're still running a virtual school. So I totally get that you are like completely stretched, and I just thank you all for your diligence, your hard work, your tenacity, you know, and everything that you give to the Douglas MacArthur community. So thank you all so much. I also want to thank DLR and Skanska for all of the work that we're doing right now. We still got a lot more to do, but we have a ways to go, but we are still kind of like moving along. And then our facilities and operations team through the leadership of Ms. Gulick and Dr. Hart. I mean, you all are like the amazing dream team that I am so grateful to have in ACPS, and ACPS benefits from your leadership. I want our community to know we are on schedule. So, you know, please know that we are continuing, in spite of a global pandemic, to remain on schedule to keep us moving forward because we know the importance of us having this new building created and built. And we know we're going to be out of that Patrick Henry swing space. And that's something I want to just keep reminding everybody. We're not planning to stay there. We're going to be out of that space. We're going to be in and out. And that we're sticking to our plans. And I just want to thank our team for keeping us on point. And I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight. I hope that we will be able to answer a lot of the questions that are out there, and also any confusion that might be out there. I hope we can clear that up too, because these community meetings are very important for us to be able to do that. I know we haven't seen you all in a little while. We have had some sessions over the past few months, but we did have the summer break and we did have a virtual world, you know, so some things happened, but I just want to reassure our community that behind the scenes, we were taking each step along the way, and we did not take a break. So we were continuing to get this work done. So I'm going to turn things back over to Ms. Gulick so that we can move on with our presentation. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all and also to welcome our community to this session this evening. So have a great session today.
Thank you, Dr. Hutchings, and good evening again, everybody. Just one more thing to let people know that this is being recorded so that you know that all of this information will be saved for us in the future. I'll ask Ms. Erica Lehman to go ahead and share the PowerPoint. The way this will work tonight, we have several slides to provide for you all for information. You should all see a Q&A box or chat feature in the bottom of your Zoom. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. The first phase of the presentation is going to focus on general project updates and design updates. And in the second phase, we will be going through construction activities and kind of what to expect in the coming months. So please and then we'll have another Q&A period for that. So please feel free to type in your questions. And when we get to those points in the presentation, we will be sure to answer them. We could go to the next slide. So as I stated, we'll first be going through a project update and design update. We will have a period for questions after that design update, and then a pre-construction and some of the early construction activities to take place. We can go to the next slide. So wanted to provide an update on the budget. In September, when we went to council for approval for the development special use permit, we did bring to the attention of the city manager and council that there was currently an cost exposure on the project based on the most recent cost estimate. Since that time, the team has been working very hard to reduce that gap. We do believe we have reduced it by about 3 to 4 million. Still anticipating, we do still see a current potential for a budget gap. However, we are continuing to work to drive down the costs. Wanted to let you know on schedule, as Dr. Hutchings mentioned, we are still on track to complete this building on time. We are providing this update for you all now, and we'll continue to stay in touch as construction gets going. Regarding construction, we are working on our last utility disconnect, hoping to have that done soon, working with the city on our demolition permit and our demolition contract. We're currently in negotiations with Skanska on. We can go to the next slide. One major thing that was discussed last week at our advisory group meeting, for those of you who might have tuned in, that our advisory group really suggested we make clear tonight, is that the access from Douglas MacArthur, if you could see at the bottom of this screen where those kind of do not enter signs are, those accesses will be restricted during construction, and we do not believe that our students walking to TC Williams or just families and community members walking through the park will have access due to safety and site constraints and a lot of work going on. But Recreation Parks and Cultural Activities did work with us and created this map to let the public know where the other outlets are on Kingston Ave and on Francis Hammond Parkway. And we will be working with them on creating detour signage so that it's really clear which points will be accessible during the construction. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear tonight. We can go to the next slide. I'll now turn it over to Miss Erica Lehman, who is our project manager with DLR Group, the architecture firm, to go through some of the design updates. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Erica. So I'll just go through sort of 4 major topics this evening. Some of the adjustments that we've made to the site, particularly those related to the adjacent neighbors. Some design changes that we made, as Erica said, to address some of the cost implications of the project. And then just a little bit about the layouts and the progress so far. So in terms of the site conditions, some of you who've been watching this closely will see that there have been some changes made, in particular over here on the east side of the building. We met a number of times with the adjacent neighbors that border the site here to the east in order to find a solution that really could meet everybody's needs, both creating the playing field space that we need for the school and the rec program, but also for making sure that we're being good neighbors to our adjacent neighbors. So there's been some slight changes here in terms of the vertical elevation of the field, as well as its offset from the adjacent property line, and some additional trees added over there to create a better sense of screening between the two. You'll also see that we've sort of chamfered the corners of the walking path around there, just so that it better accommodates really being seen a little bit more like a track for the recreation program and the walking Girls on the Run, those sorts of programs that run for this school. So those are the site changes that we made relative to the adjacent sites to the east. And then some of you may notice that the building is a little bit shorter than it used to be. And so the end result of that is our playing court here gets a little bit bigger. And then we have a little more space to accommodate some of these changes in elevation that we are doing to make sure that we can get across the site and sort of make sure we have a good, nice level playing field over here to the east side. So in addressing the cost related issues of the project, we removed some extended learning areas that were in the building. We are on, or really even still slightly above, the program required areas. We realized as we were trying to evaluate the cost that we had more extended learning areas, which are sort of flexible spaces outside of the classroom. We had more extended learning areas in the program than were required by the program. And so we opted to take those out of this north wing of the building. So any of you who've been watching this project for a while might notice that there used to be 2 of these yellow areas as we look at the northern wing of the building. And now we have one that's sort of centered between the 2 portions of that wing. And what that allowed us to do was to reduce the length of the building by 16 feet down here in the northeast corner, as well as we had a program for community room that was added in during the course of the project. And we have taken that separate community room out. Community access will still be provided to the building as is sort of normal ACPS practice. So there will be access for use of those spaces, but there won't be an individual dedicated space. And again, that allowed us to take another 16 feet out of the southern wing of the building. And so that's part of what we were doing to sort of enhance the cost control on the project while still meeting overall, overall program. So we still feel very comfortable about that. And so you can see a little bit how that change works its way up through the building, and then up to the 3rd floor. So if you haven't been looking really closely, it probably looks just the same to you as it's been for a while, but that's what we did to sort of bring some of the square footages down. And then in terms of the exterior design updates, really the building has been working towards really maintaining the same character and style that it's had for quite a while now, while making the changes that I just spoke of. So up here on the top, a view from the east, almost as if you were coming onto the site at the new bus loop. Or this is below that, a view from the field space or the adjacent neighbors to the east. And then on the top, a view sort of across Janney's Lane, looking back towards the new main entrance and the bus and the parent drop-off lane, which is here coming off of Janney's. And you'll see sort of the aerial view, you see where that bus drop-off is and the parent drop-off here to the west. And then this view here on the bottom is really as if you were standing on the opposite curb of Janney's Lane and really just taking in the entire front of the building. We are showing some trees here just to give folks a sense of scale of what it would look like with some landscaping there. In reality, there are more trees than that, but if we put them all in, you wouldn't be able to see the building at all. So we just put in some to give you a sense of what that would be like. And then these last 2 views here are view of that northeast. So this is facing Forest Park. So that's really that kind of view and connection for the school to really be able to sort of see out and share in that asset of looking out onto the forest and having that connection to nature. And then sort of looking back along the, along the east facade. And this is our interior new forest or courtyard space where we'll have some play equipment for the pre-K kindergarten level kids, as well as some planting and some bioretention boxes to help address stormwater management. So in addition to the cost savings measures that I talked about, we also are going forward with this project with 2 alternates. So for anyone who's not familiar with that term, we designed the building in one particular way. We'll call that the base bid or the original design of the project. And then we'll have alternates that could help reduce cost or address what happens on bid day. So we have 2 major alternates that we're moving forward in this project right now. One is a reduction in the size of the parking garage, and the other is substituting in a natural field instead of a synthetic turf field. You'll see here in big bold letters, these are definitely options we prefer not to take, but we want to make sure that we have those on hand and documented if we find ourselves in a position to need to take them, because ultimately the schedule of the project doesn't want to slow down. So we are having those sort of in our back pocket. And so then the alternate for the parking garage, on the left-hand side, you'll see this original, what I call base bid, the sort of larger parking garage. And then on the right side, the smaller garage. This garage still meets our code required number of parking spaces. So we're still meeting our requirements there. So I'm going to stop at this point for some Q&A, and I haven't been looking. So someone tell me if, and I also just realized I'm speaking too fast. Sorry. So I haven't been reading while talking. So I don't know if there's Q&A up right now, if there's questions that we need to answer. Erica, do you know?
Yes.
There's one. Well, we've got a couple. Okay. We've got Suzanne asking, I've heard that there is some effort to preserve trees and plants from the current property and replant or design around the existing greenery. Is this true? And could you elaborate? Thanks.
So I can start with that one, and then Erica, I would ask you to jump in. There's a few things going on with existing plants and trees at Douglas MacArthur. So one, a few of the trees we are preserving, especially some of the larger trees, and I'll let Erica speak more to that in a moment. Additionally, we're having all of the picnic tables, as well as plaques, and some of the stones that are some of the bollards that are used for seating for students for outdoor learning, moved from Douglas MacArthur to the swing space so that they can be used there, and then they can be moved back and incorporated into the ultimate final design of Douglas MacArthur. Next to that, there are some bushes, smaller bushes, flowering plants, things of that nature that we have received requests for people to either for us to either preserve them and move them somewhere else, or for people to get them to basically to use them for their own homes, or for a different facility for a donation. We had a landscaping company look at the bushes and ultimately determined that none of them would really survive a move of that magnitude, just because they weren't intended to do so. They're not made for, in a nursery where you can keep the roots maintained. I've learned a lot about trees recently, where you can keep the roots maintained enough to be able to move them. So it's not something that we've allowed, and nor something we think we'll be able to do. But Erica Lehman, if you could speak to some of the trees that we are keeping on the site as part of the design.
Sure. So in particular, we have focused on some of the trees that are out towards the front. We know there's a very significant tree that was dedicated to a former staff member in the building. So that is definitely being preserved and protected throughout construction. We've taken some of the other just major trees that are facing along Janney's Lane and incorporated them into the design for the play area. We know that those play areas really want to have shade. So rather than building sort of, man-made shade structures, we decided to preserve the trees that are there that really provide quite a lot of shade. And then last but not least is what we've been doing more recently in these changes along the east property line. They have allowed us to preserve all of the trees that exist there, which are about midway through the site and running out towards Janney's Lane, as well as a stand of trees that's actually over the property line or at the edge of the property line into Forest Park, that we thought we might have to demolish in order to build the field. But because we've changed that footprint and shifted it around a little bit, we're preserving that particular corner. And then, as I mentioned earlier, enhancing that protection and the tree buffer on that east property line.
Thanks, Erica. And I just want to address, because we got a question, and I apologize. This virtual world is making me lose my manners, but we got a question asking who am I and what is my role. My name is Erica Gulick. I'm the Director of Capital Programs, Planning and Design for Alexandria City Public Schools. I apologize for not mentioning that. So tonight you heard from Dr. Hutchings, who opened it. You heard from myself, who's an ACPS employee. You've heard from Erica Lehman, who is our project manager architect with DLR Group. And later in the presentation, you'll hear from Joe Kaifas, who's the project manager for Skanska, who's the construction firm. So just so everybody has that information. Okay, Sarah, do you have another question for us?
Yeah, we have two questions related to turf and then one more, so I'll combine the two related. Silly question, but what is natural turf field? Does that mean grass? And isn't there maintenance related to keeping up with grass?
Okay, thank you for the question. So yes, the answer is a natural turf field does mean grass. We'll of course stripe it and things like that for it to be a field, but yes, it is just grass. And with the second question, yes, it is very difficult to maintain and costly. So in what we might save now, we may end up spending later in trying to maintain it. But it is something that we are considering just given the costs of the project.
Sarah, I sorry, I saw your chat. There are actually two more questions.
Yep, go.
I can go ahead and read the next two. Someone asks, is there an interest in a community fundraising drive to help close budget gaps and avoid alternates? Their suggestion is you could maybe sell courtyard brick plaques with donor names or something similar.
So this has been brought up about using the bricks from demolition as possibly a fundraising drive. Ultimately, I'm not sure if that could contribute to the project, but it is certainly something that we can consider and we have heard and will continue to discuss. When we get to the construction portion, Joe could talk a little bit more about preserving some of the items from demolition.
Erica, while you're there, can you talk more about alternatives? You did a really good job for the staff and just kind of where we are in that process and how we don't want to use the alternatives, but can you just talk about where we are in that process?
Sure, you're talking about the alternates like the parking garage and the natural turf field. Yeah, of course. So as Erica Lehman presented, there are two design alternates that we are including in the bid package. So the way this works is once we have close to the final drawings, Skanska will go out to get people to actually do the work, and they will provide cost estimates based on how those come in. We're hoping that we will be within budget. In the case that we are not, that's why we have included the two alternates, one for a smaller parking garage and the other for a natural turf field. That being said, those are last resorts. We are hoping that our last cost estimate was still pretty early in the process. So as we refine the design and get more definitive information, we're hoping that some of the costs will come down, and that we're certainly hoping to be able to afford the full-size parking garage and the synthetic turf field, just to be clear.
Okay. There was another question about the PowerPoint presentation. Will it be posted on 12 on tomorrow, I guess? They're saying it's difficult for them to follow along with the discussion with the PowerPoint tonight. So the question is, will it be posted?
Yes, so the PowerPoint presentation will definitely be posted. I'll work with communications to see that it be posted tomorrow. And if not, it will certainly be posted early this week.
Okay. Oh, it looks like there's one more question. Sarah, did you want to take the last one?
I think that's related to the schedule, so I think that that can be added after Skanska's presentation.
Very good.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll move on and certainly keep bringing in your questions. If we have time, we'll answer them at the end. The next part of the presentation is going to focus on some of the construction activities to expect over the next couple of months. So I'll ask Joe Kaifas from Skanska to join us and present these next few slides.
So good afternoon and welcome. My name is Joe Kaifas, project manager with Skanska. We're a construction management firm working on this project. I know I'm a new face, likely to most of you, but we have been involved since January of the past year, working in the background on cost estimates, schedule, and logistics. So we're at the point now where we're finally able to get started on construction, starting in early 2021. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those preliminary activities that everyone's going to see on the first 4 or 5 months out on the site. So if you go to the next slide, please. So unfortunately, I don't have any fancy pictures or anything, but it's a bunch of discussion and definitions of a few items that are going to be going on. I kind of broke it into 3 separate phases: pre-construction, hazmat abatement, and demolition. You kind of see those identified at the very top of the screen. The pre-mobilization activity I anticipate will last anywhere between a half a month to 1.5 months. And during this time frame, we're working on contracts. Currently, we're negotiating with ACPS right now to receive our notice to proceed. That notice to proceed is expected sometime in December of 2020. Upon receipt of that notice to proceed, we'll then go and secure our contractor for the abatement, hazmat abatement, sediment erosion control, and then the demolition of the project. The next item we will attack is the hazmat abatement permit. This is a requirement of the city. This permit normally only takes a couple days to secure, but what does take some time is that upon receipt of it, we need to post it for about 20 days before we can actually start any work. In that lull of that 20 days, we're going to take advantage of some opportunities to develop and submit our rodent control plan to the city for review. At that point in time, we're likely going to be doing existing condition surveys to the adjacent properties. Utility disconnects, as Erica Gulick had mentioned, are currently underway, and actually we're down to just a very few at the 2 properties. So this project entails the demolition of 1101 and 1201 Janney's Lane. The anticipated work hours that we're allowed to work are Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., with Sundays being prohibited. Of course, the intent is not to work those times, but again, contingent upon the schedule, we may have to work some overtime if we're falling behind on a few activities. So like I say, we'll kind of get into some more discussions as we progress, but that's the basic construction time frame, work hours. And then the last thing we need to do before we really mobilize is provide proof of insurance and bonds to ACPS for our work. If you go to the next slide, please. The second kind of phase is what is considered the hazmat abatement. During this phase, we basically remove any contaminants from the building, secure them on site, and then take them to a proper disposal facility, again, all in accordance with code and the law. This activity will likely take 1 to 2 months for us to complete. During this time frame, this is when you're going to see a lot of the construction activity out on site, where we're going to be putting up security fences. As Erica Gulick mentioned, there's going to be, you're going to have no access to the parking lot, the playgrounds, and then the trailhead entrances to the site. We'll have a secure site around the perimeter of the school. At this point in time, we're going to start mobilizing a lot of our general requirement items, which include your typical dumpsters, temporary restroom facilities, PPE, generators, etc. We will also salvage existing items and memorabilia, plaques that have been identified by ACPS. We'll establish and implement our rodent control plan. During this time, you'll also see a lot of the building contents being removed, what we call soft strip. A lot of the desks, the chairs, kind of the loose furnishings of the building will start to come out and make their way into dumpsters. Once that is done, then we'll establish some negative air containments, again, done in accordance with code. And the industrial hygienist, the IHs, like a third-party oversight to make sure that everything is being done in accordance with the law. At that point in time, we'll then begin removing of the building contents, testing, and then disposing of them legally to an off-site location. Once all the contaminants have been removed from 1101 and 1201 Janney's Lane, sorry, maybe going a little bit faster, I apologize. Once the building contents are removed, then we'll wait for an all clearance letter from the industrial hygienist. Upon receipt of that clearance letter from the industrial hygienist, that will be one of our last items that we need to submit with our demolition permit application. That demolition permit application does require a handful of different items that the team, everybody involved, ACPS, DLR, and Skanska, have been working on. We all have a little portion of it that we're required to complete to secure that demolition permit. If you go to the next slide, please. And then the last phase is the actual demolition. This is where a lot of the interesting items occur, and you really get to see some real activity out on site. During this time frame, we will inspect our erosion and sediment controls that were established some time ago and make sure that they're still current and functioning. The building contents will be fully vacated from the building, and then we'll start working on clearing the site contents, which generally include the trees, the fields, the equipment, etc. We'll establish dust mitigation measures, and basically what that means is that we'll have localized water cannons and fire hoses to keep the dust down as we crush and pulverize the concrete and brick. The next item we will do is you'll see bigger excavators out there with attachments that will literally pull the building down to the ground. This portion of the work actually occurs very quickly. The sorting of the material into recyclable material, meaning concrete and metals that will be recycled, and from those that are debris that get hauled off to a landfill, will take a little bit of time. And the building slab and foundation system will require the most amount of time. This portion of the work is what most find to be the most invasive. This is where you have the chipping hammers that are out there making the constant noise, you know, kind of the pinging noise that you're accustomed to hearing at demolition. Overall, we're expecting this activity to take about 2 months, start to finish, of the entire demolition, with the actual invasive portion hopefully lasting a month or a little bit less. That's kind of the general timeline of the actual construction or the demolition portion of the building. Once the building is down and kind of sorted, materials removed, then we will verify that the underground utilities are fully cut and capped, and then as built their locations for future. And then once all those items are done, it kind of takes us to the next phase of the process, which requires another permit, and that's where the mass excavation and the parking structure will begin. So I do apologize if I went a little fast on that, but there was a fair amount of information to cover. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I guess and open it up to Q&A.
Okay, we do have a few questions now. I'll start with one about cost. Does the cost overrun include or exclude co-location costs inside the building? Is there any chance Parks and Recreation will chip in for, sorry, it's sort of jumping around on me, for a synthetic field given the likely joint use of the field? And if not, who gets the fees associated with the field use?
Okay, I will start. So the right now the cost overrun is on the total project. It does, we are including a co-location of some of the recreation items. RPCA does have funding set aside for this project. We do believe their portion of it will be within that. However, we do also have some spaces that we've provided for Campagna that are on ACPS as part of ACPS's budget at this time. Right now, we don't, RPCA will not be chipping in additional funds for the synthetic turf that we know of, although it will be kind of jointly used. It is an ACPS field, so it's not one, while RPCA manages our fields after school hours. It's an ACPS field that we will be managing. I know Jack Brown is on the call. Do you want to add anything, Jack?
Sure. Yeah. So as Erica stated, again, my name is Jack Brown. I'm with the Alexandria Department of Recreation, the Division Chief for Park Planning. So yeah, we do manage the field after school hours, and for programs that are associated directly with recreation, there may be fees associated with direct costs just for reimbursement for staff and other supplies and materials for programming.
Okay, shall I move on to the next question?
Sure.
Please explain Skanska's role on the project. Is Skanska the CM at risk? And is Skanska providing cost estimates during the design phase? Therefore, who is responsible for staying within budget? DLR, ACPS, Skanska? Question mark.
Thank you for the question. So Skanska is the CM at risk. They also have been providing cost estimates throughout the design phase. We do have additionally a third-party cost estimator that kind of reviews those cost estimates and works with us to make sure all of our interests and the interest of the project is maintained. Ultimately, we're all responsible for staying within budget, and we're all working towards that common goal. We haven't established a guaranteed maximum price contract with Skanska yet. And so at this point, we're still negotiating, and that is why there's so much collaboration on the costs.
But as you mentioned, Ms. Gould, we do want to just keep reiterating we're all responsible for staying at budget. And I think we just got to keep reiterating that over and over again. There is not a money tree or anything around for us to use. And we have already heard from the city that that is it. And you've also heard from the superintendent that we are staying within our budget. So we got to all stick to that as best as we can to make this happen. And this is not just for Douglas MacArthur. This is really for all of our projects in ACPS.
Yes, thanks for that, Dr. Hutchings.
Thank you. So there are two kind of questions that are relative to, sounds like, demolition and noise. The first one is, will there be any kind of explosive demolition happening? I don't know about the second part of that, which is it would be fun for have kids to watch.
Joe, do you want to
I'll go ahead and take that one.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, absolutely no, there will be no explosive demolition occurring at this site. The building size does not warrant it. The building is about 65,000 square foot, one story. As fun as it would be to watch, no, there will not be any explosive demolition occurring at Douglas MacArthur.
Okay. And then, so the next question was, what phase do you think is the most disruptive to the neighborhood?
During this portion of the work, definitely the removal of the foundation system and the removal of the slab. Those pieces, the reason it's so disruptive is those pieces are obviously pretty significant with reinforced concrete, and those items require a chipping hammer to slowly break up. In doing so, like I say, that is kind of what most people recognize with demolition activities. It's that kind of the pinging noise that you hear as the hydraulic hammer is chipping away at the bigger piece to process it into something that's more manageable that can be removed off-site. So that portion is definitely, in my opinion, the most disruptive to the immediate community.
Okay, and we have one last question, at least at this moment. The building has been vacant since March 2020. Why has abatement not been completed? You could have accelerated this phase of the project.
Thank you. That's a good question. And one that we wish we could have started abatement almost a year ago now. It's important to note that at the time that students were sent home in March, we didn't know what was happening for the rest of the school year, if students were going back, if there would be, any kind of different model pursued. So we didn't move any of the furniture out of MacArthur. We had to have teachers come in and pack all of their belongings and hire a moving contractor to move all the furniture. And that didn't happen until the end of last school year in June. And so then all of those materials were moved over. And since that time, we've been working through the design and some of those disconnects and other things, along with the permits that you have to have in order to go into demolition, and making sure that we're pursuing this contract, and we're pursuing this contract with Skanska, who is the CM at risk, because the asbestos is part of their first phase of the contract. And so that is why the timeline has been this way. But I do appreciate that question and can certainly see that that's how it's viewed from the public's view. So thank you for that. Okay.
That's all I see for questions. So I think we've covered it.
I think there was one submitted during the design portion that we didn't answer, and that is, has timeline been discussed? Bid day, demo start and end? When will we see excavation and build up? I'll say to that, and I'll let Joe jump in after. We don't have specific dates yet. We're moving towards that. But as Joe kind of outlined, we do have an estimate of how long these different phases take. So Joe, if you can just give a little bit more, just orient everybody a little bit more to that schedule and these activities, and what they can expect to see over the next, January, February, March.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So as I had mentioned, I think the initial phase, which will likely occur in mid to late December, is kind of securing that abatement permit. And we're required to post that permit for about 20 days. So we want to get that done before the end of the year. If that occurs, and again, please understand there's quite a few hurdles to go through in that particular portion. But assuming that does occur, we would then start abatement and actually mobilize to the site, somewhere around the mid-January timeframe. Figure about a month and a half to 2 months of abatement at that point in time, and that puts you into February timeframe, and then demolition occurring immediately thereafter. So you're looking at demolition occurring, potentially around the February-March timeframe of 2021. Again, those are rough dates based upon our understanding of where things are currently at. But again, there's multiple hurdles, multiple permits that we need to secure, and each one of those has a speed bump or hiccup that we could run into at any given point in time. So hopefully that answered the question.
I think that was good. Thank you. I don't see any other questions that we missed in the Q&A. If there are no others, and feel free to submit them in the next 30 seconds while I'm talking. But really want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I know it's been a while since we've had a community meeting. We did have several advisory group meetings, and I know we had some online opportunities. There was a lot going on, and we really appreciate you all staying committed to this project. And we're looking forward to this next step and kind of exciting portion. I also want to say, because I'm anticipating there are Douglas MacArthur parents on the call, that we are hoping to do some kind of virtual view, whether we're in school or not, of the swing space, hopefully in January, so that we can make sure you all know where your kids are going to school. Originally, if you remember, we said we would do an open house of the swing space sometime in May, and of course we weren't able to do that. So, but we do still want to make sure that you all feel comfortable when your kids do go back to school, with the school that they are in, and we will be reaching out to you all about that. So I don't see any more questions that came in. Thank you everyone for your time tonight. Thank you to DLR and Skanska and Dr. Hutchings for joining me on this presentation, and we will talk soon.